Israel is restricting humanitarian access on the one hand and accusing the UN and the humanitarian agencies of inaction on the other. This is unacceptable. The key to the issue is that Israel, as the occupying power, must fulfill its obligations under the international law and should not be permitted to use humanitarian assistance as a bargaining chip. We urge Israel to immediately open all crossings and effectively remove obstacles to humanitarian access throughout Gaza. President, I thank Algeria, Guyana, Slovenia, and Switzerland for the initiative to convene this meeting. I also thank Acting USG Msuya, Acting Karis, and Director Paulson for their briefings. Food is a primary need for all people. To be fed and to be well fed is the most basic need of human beings. Humanitarian issues cannot be politicized, nor can hunger be weaponized. This is the fundamental bottom line of the international humanitarian law. However, during the conflict in Gaza, which has been ongoing for 13 months, civilians have been repeatedly deprived of their basic needs, and all humanitarian bottom lines have been breached time and again. FAO's IPC Famine Review Committee, in its latest report, has warned that access for humanitarian supplies to Gaza has fallen to an all-time low, and that the already dire humanitarian situation there is rapidly deteriorating, with an imminent risk of severe famine in northern Gaza. It is worrisome that this catastrophe is not a natural disaster beyond human control, nor has it fallen in an unforeseen manner. Over the past year, Israel has continued its indiscriminate bombing in Gaza, attacking hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, cutting off supply of food, medicine, and fuel, and repeatedly forcing massive relocation of civilians. Such acts have resulted in unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe and destruction, with women and children accounting for the majority of civilian casualties. According to numerous analyses, restrictions on and denial of civilians' right to food in Gaza constitutes part of systematic collective punishment of the Palestinian population. The unfolding of such a tragedy in front of the eyes of the world people is a test on human conscience and the international rule of law. It must be pointed out that the biggest challenge in scaling up humanitarian assistance to Gaza does not lie in the shortage of humanitarian supplies, but lies in the man-made restrictions on humanitarian access. The international community has mobilized huge supplies for Gaza, which have to stay in the long line outside the crossing points waiting to enter Gaza. We urge Israel to immediately open all crossings and effectively remove obstacles to humanitarian access throughout Gaza. Senior Coordinator Kark has been facilitating humanitarian access in Gaza as mandated by Council Resolution 2720. We look forward to substantive progress in her work. It must be pointed out that the humanitarian hardships repeatedly seen in Gaza are not a result of inadequate efforts by the humanitarian agencies, but a result of numerous obstacles to humanitarian work. Israel is restricting humanitarian access on the one hand and accusing the UN and the humanitarian agencies of inaction on the other. This is unacceptable. We call on Israel to fully cooperate with the UN and other humanitarian agencies, ensure their safety, and facilitate their work. At present, one prominent issue in this regard is the bills adopted by the Knesset to close UNRWA, which will cut off the lifeline crucial to the survival of the Gazan population. China once again condemns any repression of and restrictions on UNRWA. The relevant bills shall be ceased in implementation and shall be revoked as soon as possible. It must be pointed out that what is most lacking in conducting humanitarian assistance in Gaza is not the material supplies or other policy conditions, but the political will of a key party. The recent completion of WHO's polio vaccination in Gaza has once again demonstrated that it is possible to expand humanitarian assistance. The key to the issue is that Israel, as the occupying power, must fulfill its obligations under the international law and should not be permitted to use humanitarian assistance as a bargaining chip. We have noted that whenever international public opinion or criticism from a certain country goes stronger, humanitarian assistance in Gaza would seem to be progressing. This in turn shows that the occupying power has not exhausted all its efforts and that there is still enormous space for action to alleviate the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. President, an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and an early implementation of the two-state solution is a fundamental path towards ending the conflict and restoring peace. China calls on Israel to heed the appeal of the international community, stop its military actions in Gaza, and stop its violations against Lebanon and other countries. The 10 elected members of the Council have tabled a draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, which is in line with the international expectations for the Council. China welcomes the action of E10 and supports the Council's early adoption of the draft resolution. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement.